It wasn't until I was having my first child, who is now almost 21, that I realized I don't want to climb that corporate ladder anymore. I don't want to work 60 hours a week anymore. I want to be home with my baby. I didn't want to be a slave to a job and not have enough money to be able to be home with my kiddo.
At a certain point, I only knew you as Anna REI mom, not as Anna Kelley.
Oh, this is her?
Yes, this is her.
Oh.
Get ready for the next iteration of you on your path to becoming wealthy. On this show, you'll get the insider's view on wealth creation, the class none of us got taught in school, with my co-host, daughter, and beginning investor, Sophia Bosch. And now, let's get started.
Welcome to the Becoming Wealthy podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Bosch, and my co-host,
Sophia Bosch.
And we have an amazing guest today. This is a very good friend. I have met her, a while back, a few years back, at a large multifamily mastermind where most of the people participating, Sophia, were actually gentlemen, and we were one of a handful that we could count with one hand of women that were there. So I would love to welcome today to the podcast, Anna Kelley. Anna, how are you?
I am so good. I'm so happy to be here with you and so proud and excited for you and Sophia to do this and being women and a mother-daughter team and talking about becoming wealthy. There's just not much that makes me more excited.
Thank you so much for being here. Just to give, our audience and for Sophia's benefit as well, a little bit of background on you. So I know you are a full-time real estate investor. You syndicate large multifamily, but you invest pretty much in all asset classes within real estate. Prior to that, Sophia, in her prior life, she was actually into private banking with Bank of America. She also worked for almost 20 years with a large bank called AIG. And she was basically there in charge of creating or presenting products to high net worth individuals, which means people with a lot of wealth that needed, to park their money and sometimes even insure, some of the assets that they have and so on and so forth. And so that's what she did before she somehow transitioned, which I'm looking forward to hearing how that happened into, into real estate investing. And she does quite very similar, to what Papa and Mama do in terms of syndicating large apartment complexes. And so with that, Anna, or do you want to kick us off, Sophia, with the first question for Anna?
Yeah, I'll start. So you mentioned, my mom mentioned that you were in the corporate world first and then transitioned out of it. What happened there?
Okay, so I'll give you the high level first, the long story really short, and then feel free to, stop me and ask me questions. But Sophia, primarily, I was taught, I grew up and I didn't have very much money, not unlike your parents. Like I grew up, my mom was a single mom. She worked 2 or 3 jobs to take care of us. All I knew was that I needed to be able to take care of myself. And my mom was in some abusive relationships and couldn't get out. She didn't have enough money to pay for childcare to be able to get out. And I thought, you know what? I never want to be in that position. So I'm going to do better. I'm going to make sure that I can take care of myself and that I have an education and I have enough money coming in so that if anything ever happened to me, if I got married and divorced, if my spouse left, if I was abused, that I was going to be okay and my kids were going to be okay. So that drive and determination was like, okay, I'm going to be successful no matter what it takes. So from a very young age, I decided I'm determined. I'm going to be the best at whatever I can do to make sure that I can be financially secure. So I put in really hard work and discipline, went to school full time while I worked full time I worked full time during the day and I went to school full time at night, and I graduated early. And a friend of mine had gotten an interview for private banking at Bank of America, and you had to have your master's degree. But she told the boss about me. She said, you need to meet my roommate. She's super smart. She's driven. And I thought, I don't know anything about banking. I really don't know what I'm doing. But I went in for an interview, and they were more impressed by the fact that I had determination, that I could work full time and go to school full time. And I did really well in school and at my job. And so they gave me a chance to enter their financial advisory training program to become a private banker. And so that I just said yes. Like, I had an opportunity. I knew that I was underqualified, but I had this mindset that I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to take every opportunity that I have, and then I'm just going to go for it and just trust that, the right things were going to happen. So I started working for Bank of America, and that's the first time I started learning anything about money. I had very wealthy clients, but I had no money of my own, right? So I was trained on telling them what to do with their money. And I thought, one day, if I could ever get money, then I'll know how to invest it and what to do with it. But I didn't want to wait till I was 65 to create enough wealth that I can invest like my clients. And something happened. I sat in front of one of my investors, and I remember telling him, I'm 49 years old, so this was a long time ago. I was in my early 20s, but we had CDs that were paying 8%, Sophia, which is like unheard of today. And I told him about our CDs, and he laughed and he said, "Oh, sweetie, I make way more than that in my real estate investments." And it was the first time anyone had ever mentioned real estate investments to me. But I saw this pattern that a lot of my wealthy clients owned real estate, and I wanted to learn about that. And so that was just kind of, in my mindset. And then I moved on to AIG, where we worked with very wealthy clients as well. Ultra high net worth individuals, they could drop down $10 million in premium for a multi-$100 million policy, and investing in private placements, kind of like what we do now with syndications, but it could grow tax-free. And so I started learning about tax-free investing. But again, I didn't have any money. I had the knowledge, I had a network, I was learning about things, but I thought I need to start figuring out how I can invest on the side. And it wasn't until I was having my first child, who is now almost 21, that I realized I don't want to climb that corporate ladder anymore. I don't want to work 60 hours a week anymore. I want to be home with my baby. And so even though I was driven and I had confidence in myself, I didn't want to be a slave to a job and not have enough money to be able to be home with my kiddo. So all these Flip This House shows started coming on when I was at home on maternity leave with him. And I convinced myself, because all the shows made it really, really sound really easy, that, oh, honey, we can just flip a couple houses a year and I can replace my 6-figure income and I can be home with my baby. Well, we tried it. I flipped my first house when my baby was 3 months old. We had no idea what we were doing. We lost money. We made a lot of mistakes, but I had enough of a confidence in myself and a determination that no matter what, I was going to figure out a way to create enough income to replace my income and have time freedom so I could spend more time with my kids. So that's what really started me on that journey, was that.
Yeah, I just, sorry to interrupt. She just said the word 2 times, determination. She talked about it when she was about to get her first job. And in something that she said there that caught my attention was, she went ahead and applied even though she was underqualified. She was determined and she was willing to work and she was willing to give it her all. And now again, in the moment that she makes the switch to transition and start to be an actual investor of real estate, again, she's like, we made mistakes, but we were determined. I was underqualified. I didn't know I didn't have all the answers, but I went for it. Which for me, I just wanted to point that out of how important it is to start even before you're ready. Like, imperfect action is better than no action. Is what I'm trying to get to.
100%. And that's so scary, because everybody's going to say, what do you think you're doing? Right. And you don't know what you're doing, but you know that if you want more, you can't do what everybody else is doing. You have to be willing to say, I can figure this out, and it's okay to fail. And it's okay to make mistakes, because I'm never going to grow and learn unless I do make those mistakes. So I've made lots of mistakes. And even with the real estate, I worked full time. I saw real estate as passive income, but I didn't yet, because my husband wasn't as excited about doing it again after we lost money the first time. He's like, I don't want to do that again. I'm like, come on, honey, we'll do better the next time. But I knew I needed to replace my income. So for a while, we shifted to solopreneur, to starting our own business. So we moved to Pennsylvania from Houston, Texas, to start my husband's practice. So I still worked for AIG. I asked them to let me work from home. At first, they said no, because no one worked from home back then. But they gave me a chance because they needed me, because I had a highly valuable skill that they couldn't easily replace. So that's important too. But I moved to Pennsylvania. I worked full time. At that point, I had 2 babies, and we started my husband's practice. And I didn't know how to start a practice. He knew how to be a doctor. And he's like, honey, you can do my marketing, and you can train my staff, and you can learn all this stuff. And so I learned how to run a practice, and I learned how to hire people, and I learned how to, do the finances and all of that stuff. And then on the side, we had tenants. So we bought a building instead of leasing it. And then we became landlords, and we learned how to become landlords, all just so I could figure out, do what it takes to start different businesses, have different income streams that'll eventually pay off. It took a whole lot longer to pay off than what I wanted on my timetable, because the great financial crisis happened the next year. But again, rather than getting down, a lot of things happened. I lost most of my 401k, and I worked for AIG when the financial crisis hit. But I said, you know what? There's always something we can do to grow.
You're talking about a year after you were born.
Yeah.
Financial crisis. You're talking about 2008, correct? Sophia's born in 2007. So you were about 12 months old or so, or a little bit older than that. So, which is a great segue to the next question, because Anna, you are so incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to all things economy, what's happening in the economy. I think your positions in banking, over 20 years, gave you a really good sense of paying attention to microeconomic indicators, and how would that affect, the investments of, the clients that you were servicing, which now is valuable information as we go, as you're doing that now on the real estate side for yourself. Can you give, Sophia, and I know this is a big question and a big ask, but in a little mini crash course, in a simplified way, basically what you see happening in the economy right now, and what does it mean for investors? She started investing in land. She does come and already, walks properties with us, apartment complexes, homes as well, because we do have a few rentals as well, single family homes. And so I want her to hear from you. What do you see happening right now? For how long do you think this is happening? And what are some of the challenges and opportunities that we can see for us as investors?
Sure. So one big thing that I learned, Sophia, is you can have a lot of information, and you can be really good at one thing, at something that you do for a career, and you can still not have a good handle on what's happening in the economy and how that can affect you. So even though I had been in private banking, Michelle, even though I worked at AIG, which was one of the companies that kind of helped bring down the financial system, because they insured mortgages and they had these credit default swaps, basically insurance against companies failing. And then all of these companies failed, and AIG had to pay out. So many, many smart people that I knew, financial advisors, very wealthy, executives, very smart executives, missed the financial crisis, completely blindsided it, because they were really watching what they're good at, insurance and finance, but they weren't really paying attention to the macro of the economy and big shifts from expansion to contraction. So what I learned, I started a business in the height of 2007, thinking the economy was booming. People were warning about a recession and a housing correction for about 2 or 3 years, but very few people listened, because the media sells good news or good news when it comes to finances, or the really bad news, right? But nobody was believing that the economy really could be fragile and could shift. And so many people were caught blindsided because they didn't understand economics. They thought it's too hard. They weren't, very interested. But because we lost so much and saw other people lose more, I learned that I have to become a student of the economy. I have to watch it. It seemed hard, it seemed heady, it seemed way above my knowledge base, and it was, but it became really important for me to understand that as you grow as an investor, and you're going to invest for decades, hopefully, there's going to be times in the economy where everything's booming and interest rates are low, for example, and a rising tide lifts all ships. So all asset values go up when there's cheap money and easy money. And we had lived in an era of cheap and easy money.
Cheap money meaning low interest rates.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
because an interest rate is basically what somebody is being compensated for the risk of you basically taking
Yeah.
some of that capital. Yeah.
So
So
you're
that's what
actually
she's referring
paying
to.
more.
So cheap money meaning low interest
Yeah.
rates mean high prices. Yeah.
And easy money, meaning it's easy to qualify for loans. And so, when the economy is doing really, really well, and it's what we call an expansion, economies go in cycles, they expand and contract. An expansion, everything's going well. Then suddenly you hit problems and you go into a recession, which puts the economy down. People start struggling, they lose jobs, they struggle to pay for things. And then banks tighten up their financing, and it's not as easy to get loans because they're worried about the economy. So I learned to watch the big shifts, and there's signs that you can see that things are happening that makes me think we might be starting to peak at the good times, and I need to start changing how I invest. So when things are going really, really well, and let's say you've come out of a recession, a really deep, a painful time in the economy, for the next couple of years, people struggle. But then it's usually 5, 7, this time it was almost 15 years that the economy booms. That's the time when you can take more risk. You can know that you're going to have appreciation and you're going to have more cash flow. But then when you start to hit the top, all of a sudden you have to realize it's not going to be as easy to make as much money, and it's not going to be as easy to get these loans, and things are going to start to shift. And then I want to shift my investments to preserve what I've already worked so hard for and to get more cash flow instead of that appreciation. So I say that, and it's a long-winded way of saying on a complicated topic, that economies change, and you have to be able to watch the signs to see when you should shift, when it's a good time to take risk, and when it's a good time to take risk off the table as what you're doing. And what I see happening right now at a very high level is very similar for very different reasons, because the economy, lots of different things make economies boom, and lots of different things cause the economies to bust. It's not always the same thing, but you can see the signs. And I think that we're very similar to a 2007. When I went into debt to start a business, which was not the best time to go into a bunch of debt to start the business. But I was listening to the news saying the economy's booming, everything's going to be great, we don't need to worry. And when everybody says that, you need to worry. So the reality is, I think there's a lot of pain. And for, Michelle and Jack, we do commercial real estate. We're seeing the pain in the commercial real estate. And there's been some signs for a couple years that this pain might be brewing. We might need to kind of shift what we're doing and how we're doing it. But I think that there's a lot of pain coming. I believe that we're heading for another recession. How deep and how bad the recession gets depends a lot on what the Federal Reserve does and what they choose to do with interest rates. And a lot of it's beyond our control. But I do think that we're heading toward a time where the expansion period is over, or we're going to start having some hard times in the economy. And for us as investors, it means that maybe some tenants can't afford to pay us rent anymore. Maybe people move back in with their family members instead of, renting an apartment. Maybe they're worried about job losses. And so there can be some struggles for people who own apartments, for example, or the interest rates stay high and it's really hard to buy assets that cash flow or to refinance, but there's always opportunity. And for me, if you don't see the opportunity and the risk, then you'll live in fear instead of taking advantage at the bottom, which is where the most of the wealth is made.
Yeah, absolutely. Which brings me to on a very good points that you're making, because what happens also if interest rates, do not come down or do not come down low enough, is that also what can happen is that less people are able to buy a home. They can't afford to buy a home because that interest rate is high, and they may need to rent. So you have those. So it's not an exact science per se. There's so many moving things that could affect, and that could make prices change and the opportunities change. And you just need to basically understand what asset classes and basically in what position do you need to be from a cash standpoint, depending on what cycle the market is in right now. So for example, Sophia, what do you see, Anna, right now in terms of like, what do you think interest rates will continue to go down? And where do you see that people right now are in trouble? We already came across a distressed, basically seller that had bridge financing. Now they cannot refinance at the higher interest rates. We're buying at a very, I would say, low price compared to what they paid for the property. Correct. They're losing like anywhere between, I think, almost $3 million on that asset, And so can you explain to her a little bit of that, perhaps?
Sure. So one of the things, Sophia, about commercial real estate that's different than residential is that residential real estate's valued based on what did the house next door sell for. So, if you buy a single family house, they're going to say, what are the last 5 single family houses that sold? And that's what your house is worth.
Kind of like
right?
You do sold comps right now for your pieces of land. Yeah. You can either go look at, what they sold. And if it's a non-disclosure state, she goes and look at listed prices, to be able to kind of like come up. So land and houses, very similar in basically in valuation, which
right. But see, with commercial real estate, it's different because the value is basically what's the income I can produce on this asset. And then what's the going rate of return that investors demand for buying that asset, for taking the risk? So one of the things that I do as a real estate investor, I don't think about real estate necessarily as real estate. I say I'm investing in real estate because it's an option that I have as an investment that's going to pay me better than the risk-free rate of return. If you only remember one thing about the economy right now, it's this. Every investment you ever make, you want to say, what's the risk-free rate of return, which is the return you can get on your money for buying a 10-year treasury note, basically putting your note in a treasury bond backed by the U.S. government. That's always been considered the risk-free rate of return. Whether it's really risk-free or not is a topic for another time. I would say it's not. But if I could buy a treasury note for 1.5%, then what I decide I'm going to pay for multifamily or for storage or for an office building has to be better than that 1.5%. And it has to give me enough of a better percentage return on my money to compensate me for the risk of owning that asset, the risk that my tenants don't pay, that the building burns down, that there's, all kinds of stuff, that interest rates go up, that my insurance and my taxes go up, right? Because basically, everything I'm buying an income stream. That's how I look at it. Or I'm buying an upside and an appreciation, and then I'm going to force it to be worth more later or to give me a certain amount of cash flow. So what happens with commercial real estate is when that treasury rate changes, if rates stay kind of the same, give or take, like they have for, a lot of years, then asset values are not going to naturally just go way up or way down. But if rates fall a lot, sometimes you can buy them cheaply, but if rates start to rise, what happens is that value goes down. It's like a bond. It has an inverse relationship. And the reason, Sophia, is if I could have a treasury rate at 1.5%, and I'm going to ballpark the number so it's easy math in my head. A brand new Class A apartment building, historically, the risk premium has been 2.3%. So if my treasury was 1.5, I want to make 3.8% return on my money for a brand spanking new apartment building. If I paid all cash, that's called the cap rate or the going market rate of return for that asset. So I say, this asset pays, $100,000. I divide that by 0.038. That's what I'm willing to pay to give me a 3.8% cash on cash. When the treasury goes up 3%, and now the treasury's 4.5%, I want to add that same 2.3% to make enough risk for me to make that return. So now I want to buy that same asset with the same cash flow, but I want to make 6.8% on my money instead of 3.8. For me to make 6.8 on the same amount of cash, Sophia, what do I have to do? I have to pay a lot less money for that asset so that that less purchase price that I'm investing gives me the same cash flow. So what happens is when rates go up, values on paper plummet. And it's not because there's anything wrong with the property. It's because the risk-free rate of return has gone up. So you need more. So if we hold assets for a long time, this is to your mom's point about buying something. If I don't have to sell that asset, it's just a paper loss, just like stock goes up and down. As long as I don't have to sell, I don't care what the value
You don't
does, as long
realize
as I
the
can make
actual
those
loss.
payments.
Yeah, exactly.
I just hold it until rates come back down. And they always do at the bottom of a cycle. So when those rates come back down, the risk-free rate of return went down. And so my money I'm going to man's going to go down and the value is going to go back up. So the beauty of commercial investing is that while there's pain, if you can buy them with the kind of debt that allows you to fix that mortgage payment so that you don't have to refinance it or sell it in order to pay off a loan coming due, then you can hold the asset for a really long period of time and cash flow until the values come back up. So I think to bring that to the economy today, interest rates are artificially really high to kill inflation. Once inflation has been conquered per se, or we hit a bad recession, the Federal Reserve will be forced to drop rates, and they usually do it drastically and quickly. So I anticipate, because I truly believe we're in a recession or going to be declared, within the next couple of months, that the Fed will cut rates drastically and more quickly than what some people expect. And they will switch to moving from fighting inflation to saving the economy and bolstering it. When that happens, I want to buy as much property as I can at the lowest
go
interest
shopping.
rate property. Like when there's distress in the market, you buy the properties, you lock in long, low interest rate debt, and then you ride the up part of the economy, that expansion for several years, and you wait till values come way back up and then you sell. And that's where you make a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sophia, what has happened right now that we have encountered, that I'm sure pretty much, it's probably your experience as well, Anna, is that there were a lot of investors that came into the commercial real estate area. And instead of locking in long-term debt, with a bank, they went ahead and probably because they were a huge repositioning, basically they needed to do a lot of repairs to a property. They needed to change the tenant base and so on. They weren't qualifying for, that long-term debt. They went into what is called bridge financing, which is what it's pretty much what the word says. It's financing that gives you a bridge for a specific period of time to make that property, improve the property, improve the tenant base, improve the income so that it can qualify for the, for the long-term debt. And when interest rates went up and those bridge financing, loans came due, some people couldn't refinance because now the interest rate was so much higher and they couldn't afford to do that. Yeah. And so
because the value on paper is down. So again, if you don't have to sell a refi, it doesn't matter that the value is down. But if you have a short-term loan and you have to refinance that at today's, double interest rates, suddenly the mortgage payment is going to be so much higher than the cash flow on that property that keeps you from getting a loan. But also they're going to say, wait a second, your property dropped in value 30%. So we'll refinance you, but you're going to have to, we want to
come
keep
up
that
with more
loan
money
to value the same percent. So you're going to have to pay in millions of dollars and we'll give you a lower loan amount. And people just can't do that. So the reason I didn't do bridge debt is because I learned that in 2008, most of the investors who were wiped out had short-term variable rate loans. So I was kind of watching the peak cycle and saying, wait a second, we have inflation coming. Like the Fed is going to have to raise rates. This could really cause, values to drop. And so I didn't do any bridge debt, thank God, because I learned from that before. So that's the kind of thing that a lot of times when we're newer or we just don't have the experience, you think nothing's going to change. And this is a drastic change in interest rates like we've never seen since I was a little girl. So most people don't anticipate it. But if you can learn to kind of watch cycles and say, when is the economy kind of peaking? How do you know, Sophia? Because there's FOMO. There's irrational. Everybody wants to be a real estate investor, a multifamily investor, a land investor, and there's this FOMO and people way overpay because they don't want to miss out. That's kind of the maximum point of exuberance and excitement, and FOMO is the maximum point of risk for you as an investor. And the point when everybody says, Sophia, run. Why are you still buying apartments? Why are you doing land? You're crazy. Real estate's crashing. The maximum point of pain is your maximum point of opportunity for you to say, I'm going to do what nobody else is willing to do while all my competition is running away, while everybody is saying, go away, you need to be afraid. That's when you say, I'm going to muster up the determination to do something that's hard, to network with good people that can lead you and guide you well. And that's when you go all in as an investor and you pick up properties on pennies on a dollar. And then you just say, I'm going to hold them until the economy comes back up.
She's like, I'm like, this is what we talk about, constantly at home about, picking properties for pennies on a dollar when those opportunities come. And it's basically that contrarian thinking that you hear Papa and I talk a lot, thinking different. Well, the masses are going this way, while they're, what is it? Zagging, or zigging, zagging, doing the opposite
when they're
of what,
zagging, right?
Yes, you're doing the opposite of what
Never
everyone
heard that.
is doing. Yeah. So that's I think something that requires a little bit of courage, and like you said, surrounding yourself with the right people, because it's counterintuitive, to be that contrarian and standing sometimes alone in your convictions of like, okay, I believe that this property and then this market and all the fundamentals of the property itself are great, and even though everyone is running away, you're still basically going in. It's kind of like firefighters. Everyone is trying to get away from the fire and they're running towards it, but they're running towards it with gear, with the right tools, with the right knowledge, with as a team, and you can make bank even in these economic times.
And the other thing is really starting small. I know, like, my son will be like, well, I don't want to do things the way you did. I want a 400 unit apartment building right away. And I'm like, you don't have the skills and the experience and the knowledge to steward a 400 unit building. I'll help you get a 4-unit building because I want you to start small and make mistakes small. Like the first house we flipped, we lost $10,000 in a year of our lives, but we learned a lot, right? But if I had bought a 400 unit building on my first flip, I could have lost $400 million instead of $10,000. And so it's like, if you start small, you're willing to take risks because it's like, I'm not risking too much other than I might fail and I might learn and I might lose a little bit of savings. So, start small when you take those big risks, or partner with other people that have the experience and know how to, steward that money to make sure you don't lose everything.
Everything, absolutely. I love that you brought in your son. I know that there has been a discussion on right before we got here and we started, the formal recording of the interview. We're talking about the choices that you gave him, as he was entertaining, college and the cost of college and becoming an investor. And Sophia is a sophomore right now in high school. She will be soon, going to college, and she has the opportunity to, thank goodness, has the grades, the extracurriculars, and so to get into some really good schools. However, that are going to be very, very expensive. And so I know that, your son was in a similar situation and you gave him a specific scenario. Can you tell us about, what you proposed to him?
Sure. So, and I will say this, I still don't know if this is the best advice, but it's the best advice that I know to give. And so this is what what I'm standing by, and, I'll trust the result. But from my own experience, where you go to school and what you get your degree in usually doesn't really matter once you get into the corporate corporate world. So I knew people that went to Ivy League schools that made less than I did and had a lower position than I did, because we just happened to get into the career and the field in different departments that took us different places, right? I went to a local college, the University of Houston, and I went and I worked, and it didn't matter where I got my degree. They just wanted to see that I had the grit and determination to get a degree, and doing it while I worked and was involved in some other things was enough to impress some employers that says, okay, you're the kind of person that we want, that can show us that you find school important, you're willing to learn, you're willing to take time out of your life to learn and grow. And so my son said, Mom, why should I go to college? Like today, it doesn't really matter. And you can teach me everything that I need to know about being a real estate investor. And he wanted to do syndications and to run funds like what I mostly do now. But I said to Dane a couple of things. I said, one, while you may not need a degree to do what I do, and yes, I can teach you things, learning on your own how to struggle through and get your degree and learn to grow without us, study hard without us, be in a dorm without us, get to know people that aren't like us, that don't live around us and all think the same. I said there's tremendous value in you growing as a person and being around a lot of different people that you can learn some emotional intelligence from just being in the environment of schooling, and you learn the discipline of doing hard things even when you don't feel like doing it. So one, I felt like it was a good thing for maturity, especially for a boy, because it is a little different. Not to sound sexist, but relationally, girls tend to have more, open relationships, maybe a little more emotional intelligence. Guys at 18 think they know everything and they want to tell you that they know everything. And so they've got a lot more growth to do. And I saw that in my own son, and we had those very real conversations. But the other thing is, I said, if you're going to work with millionaires that are going to invest with you, they're not going to give you money because you rode your parents' coattails, because you had wealthy family members that helped you learn real estate. They're going to say, what have you done? And someone is a lot more likely to give my son money when he's gone through and gotten his finance degree. He's shown that he has what it takes to get good grades, to be disciplined. And at the same time, he's taking action on his goals as a real estate investor. So I felt like today, because of wanting to work with investors and investments and wealthy people, that the education was still very valuable. The second piece of that was the cost of schooling. So my parents paid for my college education, although I went to a local school. My stepmom was a teacher, so she got a second job, summer school, in order to pay for me to go to school. So I said, whatever I can do to pay for my kids' college, I'm going to do that. However, because the degree was not really that important where he got it from, as long as it's an accredited school, a finance degree is a finance degree, right? It's not like he's going to go be a brain surgeon and you must have gone to the best medical schools or you're never going to get in. A finance degree is a finance degree. So I said, get a finance degree. You'll learn. But then he had choices. Where do I go to school? Some schools were going to cost $200,000 for that finance degree. Most schools were going to cost at least $160,000 for that finance degree for 4 years. I gave him the option of Pensacola Christian. It's in Florida. It's on one of the most beautiful beaches in the country. And 5 years is going to cost me $50,000, room and board. 50,000 versus 160 versus 200. So I said, if you choose to go to Pensacola, and part of the reason that the education is so inexpensive, it actually costs them $120,000 to educate a student. That's their cost. But they own a company that does publishing for all the Christian schools and home schools. So they do all the profits they make from their publishing company, they put into the school to keep the costs low for families. So I said to Dane, if you choose to go to Pensacola, that's going to cost me $50,000. I will gift you the down payment on your first investment property for close to the difference I would have paid for you to come out with just a degree. So do you want to come out with just a degree? Or do you want to come out with a degree and your first investment property that you can live in one of the units, be completely financially free, and explore who you are, explore what you want to do, be able to make some investments, take all your income, have your cost of living covered, And then you can figure out if you want to be an entrepreneur, or you want to work at a fund, or you want to do a free internship. But if you can come out with both the degree and the rental property to give you enough passive income that you're financially free right away, you'll be a promise in a much better place and a much, than you would if you just got the degree. So that's what he chose to do. So we're literally negotiating a deal right now to try to find his first investment property as he's a senior, getting his finance degree.
Oh, so that's where the 11 units come in
Yes.
into play. Sounds amazing. So I really love, that rationale behind it. The do you want to come out, X amount, and if you weren't paying for it, he would be coming out of school with all the debt,
And we experienced that, Michelle, because my husband came out of chiropractic college where his parents paid for undergrad. But when we got married, he had 6-figure college debt. It took us 7 years of one income while we worked to pay off that debt. Then we went into debt to start a business. And that was a whole nother mistake. But the more debt you have, it increases your cost of living so that then you have less money to invest. So whatever you can do to keep your debt down, whether your parents are paying for your school or not, if you can be in $40,000 or $50,000 of debt versus $160,000 to $200,000 in debt, it's a no-brainer in today's day and age, in my opinion, to go get the less expensive school, come out with less debt. And if you put some of that extra money into an investment property, you can use that investment property cash to pay down your school loans for whatever school loans you do have.
Absolutely. So she's basically creating the cash flow from the property to go ahead and pay for, for the school loan. I
You
love
want
that.
to give me that too?
Yes, I think this is an amazing, eye-opening, proposal, and I love that, you are living it right now with your son, and you guys are almost getting ready to making the second part of that a reality with the 11 units that you're looking to put under contract right now. And he can live in one, and he's renting the other 10, and it's fabulous.
Thank you. And my daughter, I'll tell you similarly, Sophia. So my daughter is 17 and she's about to graduate high school. And my son loves real estate. Like, he got the bug. Now, he hated it in the beginning because he saw, like I'm sure you saw, the blood, sweat, and tears in the early years where like you were ruled by your apartments and living on rice and beans. And they were in apartments while we painted all night before the tenants moved in. Like, they hated it. But then they saw what it built for us. And it was like this aha that took him till his senior year to go, okay, I do like real estate, but show me the easy way instead of the blood, sweat, and tears. My daughter, she loves mission work. She wants to work, she's gone on a couple of different mission trips where she's worked with underprivileged kids. And she either wants to teach, like on a Navajo reservation where she's been in New Mexico a couple of times, or she wants to go on mission work. So she's like, I don't like real estate. But you know what? She finally understood. This is what I told her. You don't ever have to love it like I do. I grew to love it because of what it did for me and for my family. But I said, you don't have to love it. You just have to learn how to create passive income, put the right people in place to own it and to manage it for you, to asset manage it, to property manage it. And then if you have that extra cash flow, I said, it doesn't matter. She's going to go for a degree, also a less expensive degree. She's going to get either her education degree or a missions work degree. And I said, she'll never make a lot of money in her career, but it doesn't matter because if she has that passive income coming in, she can do what she loves without regard to how much money she'll ever make doing what she loves, because she has that passive income coming in to pay her the equivalent of a salary if she had chosen a higher paying career, but she wants to be in mission work and benevolence, and she'll never make a ton of money doing that, but she'll do what she loves because she has the passive income to allow her to do what she loves. So both of my kids want a totally different thing in life, but for both of them, I'm like, you have to get and understand passive income and figure out how to steward it. And if you can get that right, the sky's the limit as to what you can do with your life.
That's what my parents keep telling me, because for a long time, I wanted to be like an architect, like something, like, but that was a no. Then I started looking into real estate, but it's not my favorite thing in the world. But I know that it will provide me the life that I want to live. Like, it'll fund the life I want to live.
Yeah, and we basically keep telling her, that the financial category of your life is one, and your career is another.
They don't
so
always
many
have to be the
people
same.
think about those two being one and the same, and they don't have to be one and the same.
Right. And that's where, the cash flow game, if you've never played it, I really like, the
Yes,
rich dad
yes.
principle.
Yeah.
We play it all the time. And I had to pay my kids to stay in the game when we started because they hated it that much. Now they love it. Now they want to play it all the time, right? Because they're learning like, wow, this is really eye-opening. But, if you think of the 4 quadrants of the rich dad, you can either be an employee or you can be a solopreneur where you work on your own business, but your work is dependent on it thriving, or you can be an investor, or you can be run a big corporation and be a business owner. And not everybody is fit or desires to be in all the same categories. So you might say, you know what? I don't love real estate. I don't want to be a solopreneur because I know if something happens to me, my income's done. I don't want to be an employee maybe because maybe you want to work for yourself. Maybe you don't want to run a big company. But what if you could do what you love and you could be an investor? Then you just continue to buy properties that do the work for you, that bring in that cash flow. And if you don't love operating them, pay a good operator. So I always tell my kids, and I do the same thing, even if I think I'm going to run it myself or my family's going to run it, I still build in the cost of a property manager always so that I can travel the world. I can do whatever. I'm paying the professionals to manage my investment for me. So you don't have to be, to your point, a real estate operator. You can be a real estate investor and then go live the life that you want, paid for by your investments.
Anna, I mean, we could talk to you forever. I love everything that you've shared with Sophia. I love now that you've opened a little window into, this possibility. And she's not just hearing it from mom and dad, but from somebody else that is actually implementing it, as we speak, with children that are slightly older than she is right now. And if anyone that is listening to this right now is interested in learning more about what you do in your multifamily syndications, and basically what is Anna up to, that up to a certain point, I only knew you as Anna REI mom, not as Anna Kelley.
Oh, this is her?
Yes, this is her.
Oh.
Now you really like what I have to say. No, I'm totally kidding. But, REI Mom for me, I mean, it's like my two worlds. I love real estate because of what it does for my family and what it does for other moms, and it's the thing that allowed me to have the time freedom to really pour into my kids and in a way that I wouldn't have been able to, before. And so, but yeah, you can find me on AnnaKelleyInvesting.com. I have coaching and consulting. I help people with deal review if you want a second pair of eyes of, looking at different investments. And then when we have the right opportunities, we do syndications as well for multifamily.
Thank you so much, Anna, for taking the time to pour into Sophia, equipping, edifying her, and just sharing your wisdom and your love here with us. It's been great. Thank you so very much, and we'll let you go on free, into your weekend. Yeah, it's such a pleasure to know that there is this amazing pool of women out there now, especially doing, not just small real estate, but large real estate. And I am seeing those shifts where we're not just 5 anymore in a room, but it's changing. And now, thank you so much for pouring into her and pouring into possibly the next generation of, ladies and girls that are listening and watching, the Becoming Wealthy podcast. So very, very grateful. Thank you so very much.
You're so welcome. It's been my honor and my pleasure. And I'm wishing you tons of luck and success, Sophia, and becoming wealthy on your own in many, many, many ways, other than just financially, but finding the joy of growing into a young woman and finding your path and what makes you excited and using real estate to help you to do that in a powerful way.
That is true wealth for sure. Thank you so much, Anna.
Yes. You're welcome.